Welcome to Barbara's Bulletin, the podcast where we bring you the latest news and updates from around the world. I'm your host, Barbara, and I'm glad you're joining us today. We have a packed show for you, with stories that will inform, educate, and maybe even surprise you. First up, let's take a look at some of the major headlines from the past 24 hours. We have reports of a government shutdown, updates on the Israel-Gaza conflict, and news of a devastating blast at an explosives plant in Tennessee. But before we dive into those stories, I want to highlight two other important developments that caught my attention. In Vatican City, Pope Leo XIV is making headlines with his efforts to address the ongoing crisis of child abuse within the Catholic Church. A new report from the Church's Commission on Child Protection reveals that the institution still has a long way to go in terms of accountability and transparency. The report calls for tangible sanctions against clergy members who have committed abuse, as well as greater support for victims and survivors. Meanwhile, in a separate story, we're seeing a growing trend of institutions and organizations taking steps to acknowledge and make amends for past wrongdoing. In Norway, the government has officially apologized for the country's treatment of Romani people during World War II. And in the United States, several major companies are facing lawsuits over their historical ties to slavery and segregation. These stories highlight the complex and often difficult process of confronting the past and working towards a more just and equitable future. As we explore these topics further on the show, I want to encourage our listeners to think critically about the role that power, privilege, and accountability play in shaping our world. We'll be examining these issues in more depth throughout the episode, with expert analysis and commentary from a range of perspectives. So stay tuned for a thought-provoking discussion that will challenge your assumptions and broaden your understanding of the world we live in. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. We're halfway through our program, and I'm excited to dive into our next story. Today, we're looking at a developing situation in Venezuela, where President Trump has been making headlines with his comments about striking the country. According to recent reports, President Trump has confirmed that he approved covert CIA operations inside Venezuela. This news has sparked a lot of debate and concern, both domestically and internationally. The president's comments have been seen as a significant escalation of tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela, and many are wondering what this might mean for the future of relations between the two countries. Now, let's take a step back and look at the context here. The Trump administration has been increasing pressure on Venezuela in recent months, citing concerns about the country's humanitarian crisis, corruption, and authoritarian government. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Venezuelan officials and has been working to support opposition leader Juan Guaidó, who is recognized by many countries as the legitimate president of Venezuela. However, not everyone agrees with the Trump administration's approach. Some critics argue that the U.S. is overstepping its bounds and interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs. Others are concerned about the potential consequences of military action, including the risk of civilian casualties and destabilization in the region. It's also worth noting that there are different perspectives on the situation within Venezuela itself. While some Venezuelans support the opposition and are calling for regime change, others remain loyal to the current government and see the U.S. as a threat to their country's sovereignty. As we try to make sense of this complex situation, it's essential to consider multiple viewpoints and sources. We'll continue to follow this story and bring you updates as more information becomes available. In the meantime, I want to encourage our listeners to think critically about the issues at play here. What are the potential consequences of U.S. involvement in Venezuela? How might this impact the people of Venezuela, as well as the broader region? And what role should the international community play in addressing the humanitarian crisis and promoting a peaceful resolution? These are all important questions that deserve careful consideration. We'll be exploring them further in future segments, so stay tuned for more analysis and discussion. For now, let's take a brief pause before moving on to our final story of the day. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. We're closing out today's show with a look at the escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine, as well as the international community's involvement in the conflict. As we've been following, Russia has accused the United Kingdom of helping Ukraine coordinate a large-scale drone assault on Russian military airfields this summer. The FSB director, Alexander Bortnikov, claimed that British intelligence provided direct supervision for the operation, which targeted 5 Russian airbases thousands of kilometers apart. However, it's essential to note that these allegations have not been independently verified, and British officials have previously dismissed similar accusations as disinformation. Ukraine's SBU security service reported that over 100 drones launched from inside Russia were used in the attack, resulting in significant damage to Russian aircraft. Meanwhile, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues to intensify, with both sides suffering losses. The Ukrainian energy grid has been severely impacted by recent Russian strikes, leading to emergency power outages in several regions. In a separate development, the UK has warned that Russia's actions could lead to the largest war in Europe since 1945, with potentially devastating consequences for global stability. As we strive to provide a balanced perspective on this complex issue, it's crucial to acknowledge the various narratives and interests at play. We urge our listeners to remain informed through reputable sources and to engage in respectful discussions about the ongoing conflict. That's all for today's Barbara's Bulletin. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, stay engaged.